that they may be looking at what their legal options are, since they could be without a water supply for several months now, a reliable water supply. Just anything the province might do to help out PA on here, since then.
I've been in contact with the mayors, and in one case a First Nations chief of Cumberland House, as we have gone through the response to this process from my office, and that's the question that I've asked. I've asked the mayors and the leaders affected whose drinking water, whose community's drinking water is directly affected. If they need other resources from government that they don't feel are forthcoming, they should contact us. They have my cell phone. The Minister Ryder has been in contact with them. I think Minister Cox as well in many instances. Husky has said that they are going to be responsible for the financial costs of all of this, and I expect that to be the case. Yesterday, for example, in discussing things with the Mayor of Prince Albert, let me just say credit to the mayor, to the mayors and the local leadership in all of these communities, and credit to the province's emergency response folks for doing an amazing job again, facing something that is obviously a terrible situation, and having faced relatively unique in terms of what the province has faced recently. In my discussions, Mayor Dion especially, obviously he's got some interim measures that his municipality has taken. I think they've done a great job of identifying what those are, together with the Saskatchewan Water Security Agency. So has Mayor Hamilton. But with respect to the financial situation, Mayor Dion points out that there are certain businesses in PA that have foregone operations. Car washes, laundromats, they're just not in business. And so we think of the big costs and the responsibility for those on the company, in this case Husky. But we also should be concerned about, as Mayor Dion has pointed out, that there's been business interruptions costs for a lot of small businesses, and that'll need to be a part of the cost to Husky as well.
Should we be concerned about safety of pipelines?
This is interesting you'd ask that question. I first commented on this issue Friday morning last when we were in Yukon. The very first thing I said in those comments, and I think the tape's been sent around, is that our concern should be the response. That Husky would be responding, that government officials would be responding. In this case, we need to make sure that drinking water is available, that potable water is available to communities affected by this. That's the first challenge. And I mentioned that as the first part of my answer in Yukon. Secondly, I answered the question of pipeline safety, and that's the only part that got coverage, along with some attendant criticism that, hey, Wall's only talking about pipeline safety in the face of this major spill. So I'm a little hesitant to answer your question, frankly, because our number one concern right now is the response. We'll get into the debate about pipelines versus rail, or how we move oil across this country at a later date. But for now, I think we should just set it aside because of that particular, the coverage that came from that first comment I made.
We've got a different group here today, firstly.
We do.
We're much friendlier. Secondly,
well, this was local coverage. This was local coverage too, Ned, but
what is your understanding of the ecological impact of this spill?
Well, that's what we're trying to get a handle on. I mean, again, the first duty of government and Husky and the municipalities is to respond, is to make sure people have potable water. We have a lot of folks in the arm of PA who don't have water, and so we're providing through, I think the government's cooperating, the municipalities are cooperating, and Husky's offered to provide potable water. That's got to be the first immediate response for all of us. But you bet we'll need to get a handle on what the ecological impact is on that river. That Saskatchewan's waters, our lakes and our rivers, our habitats, precious to all of us. There's an economic element to it, but it's our environment, it's our habitat, and Saskatchewan people put a high priority on it. So we need to determine the long-term ecological impact, to the extent there is one, and the best ways to clean it up. I mean, the good news is there's worldwide experience. We've asked the Saskatchewan Water Agency and Environment to tap into. There's technologies perhaps that we know there are technologies out there that are available, and so we want all of those explored, and we've got to have complete restoration and rehabilitation in terms of habitat and the ecology along the North Saskatchewan River.
You said that you've talked to community leaders, you've talked to First Nations leaders, presumably talked to officials, and I know everybody wants to say, well, we'll deal with the investigation, we'll deal with all of those other questions later, but clearly there have been a lot of questions about the speed and effectiveness of Husky's response. Do you have anything to say about, like, are you satisfied with what you've seen so far? Understanding, yes, there's an investigation coming. Are you satisfied with what you've seen so far?
There's been a spill, and people are without water in Saskatchewan. No, I'm not satisfied. I don't think anybody should be. I don't think Husky's satisfied. They better not be. We need to find out all of the details around the situation. They've indicated they want to find out the details. As you know, we have a pretty rigorous process in place. I want to share with you that in the last budget, we actually took away duties from those who are pipeline inspecting so that they could just focus on inspections. And so we have 24 out in the field and 3 in Regina, whose job principally is just to deal with inspections. We have requirements of companies, and in this case, Husky drives the line. As you know, they use something called the smart pig. That's the technology that's sort of internal to the process, and that has to happen on a regular basis. Now, it appears that all of those things were happening, that all of those processes were being followed. That's how it appears. But Husky themselves have said they want to investigate, and we want answers, we want assurances that that was the case as well. As to their response in terms of being financially responsible and accepting responsibility for the pipeline, I do think that was the right step for Husky to take.
But in between there, you've got, like, obviously everybody is not satisfied or thinks that the spill itself is acceptable. And Husky has for sure accepted responsibility financially. But in between there, I guess I'm wondering, in terms of their emergency response, in terms of their cleanup response, are you satisfied with what you've seen there? You say the monitoring processes were all in place, but are you satisfied with what you know about the response of Husky on the cleanup and containment side?
Well, those on the front line, including local leaders, are saying that that Husky's been forthcoming in the response. That would be my observation as well. I think we'll know more after the event as to what could have perhaps been done differently, and we'll be asking those questions. I don't have any evidence that Husky's response to this, other than the 14-hour piece set aside. But in fact, once the leak was known, their actual physical response to the issue, cooperating with government, cooperating with municipalities, I can't put my finger on some egregious error or misjudgment that I would say they made, or that officials are telling me that they made. Now, I mean, we're going to wait and go through after the fact, go through the response from all agencies. But I can't give you anything right now, Jeff.
Finally, Jim Toy, the city manager for Prince Albert, talked to Stephanie this morning, and I wouldn't expect that you necessarily would have heard that, but he did have some complaints. He said he wasn't at all satisfied with the level of communication with Husky and the city. He wonders why in the world they haven't provided booms, for example, to the city of Prince Albert to ensure that the oil doesn't gum up the shorelines, that sort of thing. So. Again, if you haven't heard that, you haven't heard that. But,
well, in talking to the mayor yesterday, I think there was a concern about the availability of booms that Husky and the government can be a part of, and so we want to respond to that. When I discuss things with the mayors and local leaders, I report back to officials and say, look, here's the concerns that we're fielding. I think that I heard from the mayor of Prince Albert, again, who I want to congratulate for Mayor Dion's leadership in this, indicating that some of the first conversations with Husky were not where he would want them to be, but subsequent to that, they improved significantly. And so the question of the availability of booms or other specific elements of both Husky and the government's response are fair game. Frankly, in the process, and I know Jim, I've known him for a long time, he's a pretty straight shooter, and he'll say things as they are, and I've always appreciated that about him. And so, as the event's going on too, we're fielding this kind of input that informs what we're going to do on a go-forward basis. But I just want to make some things very clear too about the response from my office. I was the first to comment on this last Friday morning, indicating without a lot of details at the time, obviously, that the response needed to be the #1 priority. And over the weekend, I had folks in my office reach out to Husky to make sure that they, in turn, at the highest levels of the company, were reaching out to mayors, and obviously to ensure that our response was being deployed as it should be, and as it has been in the past through the disaster assistance piece in Jim Ryder's file. We also made sure that ministers were engaged with the issue, and typically in these situations, in the case of forest fires and floods, we give a little time for response. And when the response we think has been deployed and is operating at a level that we're reasonably comfortable with, then I'll go in for a visit to show support with those that are affected, which will happen tomorrow. But this has been following a process that we've used in other disasters. We want to make sure we have the response in place first, and then we'll get into tours and sort of firsthand looks at the situation. Again, as I said, which I'll do tomorrow. In the meantime, we're going to continue to be in contact with mayors, as I've been, and making sure that the province is doing what it could, knowing that Husky bears the responsibility here financially and in terms of response, and they've indicated a willingness to take that responsibility, and we accept that position.
So
What responsibility should be with the government, given I believe it's one pipeline inspector per 1,000 kilometers of pipeline in the province?
Well, we've actually taken a step to remove, as I've said, in the last budget, we've removed other duties from inspectors that previously existed. So the 24 inspectors were responsible for some other things within their offices, and in this last budget, we said they should be focused exclusively on the pipelines. Remember, it doesn't just rest with the inspectors. The regulations we have in this province, which we strictly enforce, require the companies to inspect and report through things like what's called smart pig technology, through things like driving the lines themselves. And there is a reporting process in place. So it's not just 24 inspectors who now are free to simply do that. It is also companies that are required to undertake their inspections, and that, as far as we know, has been happening across the province.
Do you have an idea of what your tour will be like tomorrow?
We're going to go on, there's an op center, for example, in Prince Albert. We want to have a look. I want to get to Prince Albert and to North Battleford specifically, and possibly Melfort. Melfort has in talking with the mayor, they have their sort of transition or interim system they have is he's feeling quite comfortable with, although they have a truck in front of City Hall that's filled with potable water if anybody wants to come and utilize that. But they're pretty confident about it. We all know that Friday is the current deadline for Prince Albert to have its interim plan implemented, and so that's a couple of days from now. Long if you're in the RMPA and going without water, but it's been, I think, still overall the response from PA has been very rapid, given that they've had to build a pipeline and get some water to their community. And in the case of North Battleford, they're able to use groundwater.